Hello, and welcome to episode 9 of USA Battle Royale. I'm recording this directly after episode 8, which is why my voice sounds the same. I figured since probably one of the only events of this episode was rolled in the last episode, it makes sense to just record it right away. So with that, let's get right into it. Texas is invading east into Arkansas because they want to get their old territory back. The Pink Alliance is upset with them about this, but California had a plan drawn up for this war as well, so they're not that upset about it as they could have been. Texas invading into Arkansas was not the way the war was supposed to start, but it's okay because they can just get into their war plan starting now. And the first step of the war was to knock Montana out of the war. So as soon as Texas alerts their allies that they were doing this, Montana alerts the government that they are being invaded into by Colorado as a million troops from Colorado pour into the border with Montana and slowly get into formation, creating a massive bulge into Montana. And unfortunately for Montana, their survival is not that strategically important to the rest of their alliance, who kind of throw them under the bus and don't really support them and leave them to fend for themselves. Minnesota makes sure that Colorado doesn't invade further east, but Montana is being invaded into by Colorado, and this is all according to California's plan, as Montana doesn't really have a feasible way of surviving this, and before long they agree to surrender. So California was able to knock one state out of the war just like that, but it might not be that easy for the rest of the war. Let's go to Ohio, West Virginia, and regular Virginia, who might not be having things so well, as Pennsylvania and New York are launching an invasion into Delaware, which they did very successfully, leaving Virginia on defense to make some naval invasions that are repelled, as control of the Chesapeake falls into the hands of New York and Pennsylvania. Ohio invades into upstate New York, which is kind of what they've always been trying to do, taking Buffalo, which was no longer the capital, it was moved back to Albany, and invading into western Pennsylvania, where not many people live. While Pennsylvania has gotten control of the Chesapeake and has used it to take land from Virginia, on the other side, Virginia has been focused on taking out Georgia by invading into their coast and trying to capture Savannah. However, Georgia has been managing to defend better than Virginia was expecting, as Illinois starts invading into the Tennessee parts of Georgia, or Virginia, not Georgia, and doing pretty well at that, while they get a little bit into Ohio, West Virginia before Ohio, West Virginia is able to stop them. And over here, this part of Colorado is basically surrendered to the Orange Alliance because it seems like it would be better. This is actually part of California's plan because there's just no point in defending this. Both the Orange Alliance and the Pink Alliance knew there was no reason to defend this land. Hence, they don't defend it, and the Orange Alliance doesn't even put any resources into taking it. Alaska, realizing the predicament they're in, just leaves the Orange Alliance because there's no point of it. California threatens to invade them if they don't, and they literally can't help out the Orange Alliance in any way anyway, so they leave the Orange Alliance. There was no reason for them to stay. However, things are going pretty well for the Orange Alliance in the east, as Virginia has its main portion of its state being taken by New York and Pennsylvania, and Georgia is managing to push Virginia back in the north, as Virginia decides to redirect basically all of their armies to the north, which does allow them to do a surprising amount of damage against Pennsylvania and New York over here, and start pushing into more populated parts of Pennsylvania and New York. However, they don't get to recapture the peninsula that Delaware's on. They only take control of half of the Chesapeake navally, and Georgia is now chasing them back into their state, basically destroying the countryside wherever they go, so that even if Virginia wins the war, they'll be crippled afterward. In the Western theater, things are going much closer to California's plan, as Kansas is just way too weak to stand up to Texas and Colorado combined, and so very quickly falls. They don't ever surrender because they want to be brought back after the war. They kind of expected to be taken as part of their calculations. And the rest of Montana, which is being occupied by Minnesota, is slowly being invaded by Colorado from the west, and Minnesota is now being properly invaded as Colorado starts taking parts of its territory back. Ohio, West Virginia manages to push over here to try and regain some of the front lines, but in the east, New York makes a clever play using the Great Lakes to retake the northern coastline that they have over here. This is the border with Canada, but then once they have reached Buffalo, they then use the Great Lakes to start basically berating Ohio, West Virginia, and it's pretty annoying for Ohio, West Virginia, who is seeing Illinois invade into them from the west, and New York and Pennsylvania invade into them from the east. Virginia finally manages to recapture Delaware, as well as the rest of their peninsula, and starts taking Philadelphia, but before Philadelphia can be captured, a massive counteroffensive happens from Pennsylvania and New York that manages to push Ohio and West Virginia back a lot, and Virginia, obviously. The Western Front continues to go significantly better for the Pink Alliance than the Eastern Front, as Minnesota is basically screwed, being completely pushed back to the east, and Wisconsin is paid a lot of money to join in on the Pink Alliance so that they can start invading into Minnesota and get them out of the war even quicker. And Minnesota realizes that there's no point in fighting, but they still hope to eventually be brought back after the war, so they continue fighting. Wisconsin doesn't invade anywhere besides Minnesota and is only unofficially part of the Pink Alliance, so it's kind of weird that I'm coloring them pink, but it's just to make it easier for you to see. However, Ohio, West Virginia does use, I think this is like Michigan, to start invading into this part of Illinois, and at this point Wisconsin does join in to help the invasion go more smoothly, so Wisconsin is fully part of the Pink Alliance now. However, Ohio, West Virginia sending troops over there might have been a big mistake, as they get pushed back massively over here, with the main part of their state being Ohio and West Virginia, basically crumbling, and their armies are rushed back east, which leads to all of this being retaken by Illinois and Iowa, and Wisconsin beginning to be invaded into, as the western front of the eastern front, if you understand what I'm talking about, so it slowly gets collapsed. Thankfully, Ohio, West Virginia does manage to push New York and Pennsylvania east here. Georgia has been steadily pushing into Virginia, and now Virginia is just back to their home territory, as well as the northern territories they have, which once again get captured. So Virginia is not doing very well. Over in the western front, all of Minnesota has been taken, all of Colorado has been retaken, all of Kansas has been taken, and the Pink Alliance is continuing to push east at a very alarming rate for the Orange Alliance. However, if they can't push east quickly enough, then the Orange Alliance will take out Ohio, West Virginia, and it might be over for the Pink Alliance at that point, and this is what the Orange Alliance hopes for. So they make a massive spearhead over here to try to basically cut off Virginia from Ohio, West Virginia, and Illinois makes their own massive spearhead over here, and together they're able to cut off Virginia, and pretty quickly Virginia is kind of losing all hope as troops start to mutiny, and there's no way for them to survive, and they all eventually surrender, even if the state itself refuses to. Ohio, West Virginia, having lost most of its forces to battles already, and not standing well, also loses pretty quickly, with Wisconsin withdrawing from their lower peninsula holdings. So now the war has been consolidated to one front, which is the best case scenario for the Orange Alliance. However, something is about to happen that will change the course of the war. So first of all, the Pink Alliance is doing marginally better than the Orange Alliance in the Western Front. However, Wisconsin is about to be shown their place by the Orange Alliance, getting fully invaded into by the Orange Alliance from their post in Michigan, and fully being just annihilated. like so. However, New Orleans is rushed to by Texas and sloppily, but quickly captured, which is very bad for Georgia, who was using it pretty well. And now an event is going to happen that's going to shake up the war and lead to one of the two alliances winning. Florida will join one side. Whichever side Florida joins is going to win the war, almost certainly. So if they join the Orange Alliance will be able to push the Pink Alliance back. And if they join the Pink Alliance, then the Orange Alliance will be surrounded, and it'll only be a matter of time before they're destroyed. Place your bets in the comments, but I'll reveal which side's going to win in 3, 2, 1. It's the Pink Alliance. Florida joins the Pink Alliance because they realize that if they join the Orange Alliance, they're not going to be able to gain anything, since the only state they border is Georgia, and Georgia refused to give up any of their land in order for Florida to join their alliance, which is probably the biggest mistake Georgia could have made. As Florida, having fresh troops that have never fought before or have never fought in years, sends all their troops into Georgia, taking it pretty quickly. People in the eastern parts of Virginia start rebelling against their occupiers, leading to a massive Virginian rebellion that ends up losing the Orange Alliance a lot of troops in the west. As they slowly decide to retreat more and more to try and combat this rebellion, which ends up not even working as it starts spreading, and they take up militias, and eventually they start being supplied by Florida, who reconquers this coast, and the Orange Alliance is slowly getting destroyed, as Iowa is completely taken, and Illinois is starting to get taken as well. Wisconsin is fully liberated in the Upper Peninsula and uses naval powers to free their Lower Peninsula holdings before invading into Ohio, West Virginia to liberate them as well, leading to Ohio, West Virginia seeing massive rebellions throughout against the Orange Alliance's occupiers. That leads to the entire Midwest falling to the Pink Alliance before Virginia manages to liberate itself with the help of Florida, obviously, as well as the rest of the Pink Alliance. Delaware is also freed, and Pennsylvania and New York are the last front, and Pennsylvania will be fully stomped over, and New York, seeing where things are headed, will agree to a conditional surrender, even though they know they're going to lose almost all of their land. So let's see what everything looks like after this war. And this is what the country looks like after the war. Maine is split off from New York and given a government that's aligned to the Pink Alliance, specifically Virginia. So if anything happens to Virginia, it should also happen to Maine. As you can see, there are a lot of very powerful states, as well as a lot of weak states. Iowa was spared because no one really wanted to take their land. Montana was spared, and New York because they surrendered. There were a total of 5 states that didn't participate in the war at all. So that's that. Both Wisconsin and Florida were only in the war temporarily, but Ohio, West Virginia does border Texas, so at least there's that in terms of the Pink Alliance still being contiguous. But we're going to do a few more events, I think. California will be facing a rebellion. So California has just recently annexed both Nevada and Oregon, or at least parts of Nevada and Oregon. Now, the parts of Nevada are pretty sparsely populated, but California has a majority of Oregon's population. So what's going to happen is that, starting in Portland, significant portions of the population of what used to be Oregon will start rebelling from California, and obviously Oregon is going to tacitly support these rebellions. California calls on the Pink Alliance to help them, but no, the Pink Alliance just does not care about them. The Pink Alliance is basically a collection of states which besides like Arizona and Maine, which just cares about Virginia, all just care about themselves, which is bad for when they're facing a rebellion, because although California will try moving their troops here and even start an invasion into Oregon, California has most of their armies still coming back from the eastern front of the war. Like, this is very shortly after the end of the war was negotiated, and the people of California are really upset that they just fought in a war and didn't get anything out of it, and so support for the Californian country is at an all-time low, and most of their military is drafted people who don't really care about actually serving their state, and so before long the Oregonian Rebellion has basically retaken all of Oregon, and California has to basically sigh and agree to give Oregon their sovereignty back. So this is what that looks like. Alaska will be forming an alliance with Hawaii. So in a surprising turn of events, Alaska and Hawaii, who have pretty recently gone to war with each other, will actually decide that they're going to put aside their differences, because they can clearly see that the contiguous United States is kind of challenged right now, and also because Hawaii is facing significant rebellions in their Alaskan territories and wants an excuse to get rid of them without seeming weak. And so what they do is they give Alaska their territory back. Hawaii will continue to claim that this is all just a thing that they're doing so that they can join an alliance with Alaska, but Alaska is claiming they're joining in the alliance so they can get their territory back, which is more close to the truth. Hawaii just didn't want to deal with Alaskan rebels anymore, which they've been quelling for a while. However, it's not just these two states who will be interested in joining an alliance to just get away from the whole thing, and specifically these 4 northwestern states will all join in on their alliance after asking politely to join in, because they just don't want to deal with the Pink Alliance. Officially, you are not allowed to join in this alliance if you are east of Colorado, so none of these states will join in on it. This alliance just formed. Let's do one more event this episode, and then we'll call it. Wisconsin will be facing a rebellion. So this is actually a minor rebellion in Wisconsin's Michigan territory, and this time Wisconsin actually does something that's not been done before, which is Wisconsin will decide to actually give Michigan full sovereignty back, and that is simply because they do not want to deal with the rebellion. They feel like they probably would lose out to the rebellion anyway. They saw what happened in Oregon, they saw what happened in Alaska. They don't want to be on the losing end of this, so they decide to just give up Michigan, and Michigan is back. Let's do one more event, actually. Michigan, who just formed, will be invading Northeast. So it turns out Michigan didn't just want their independence from Wisconsin, they also wanted their independence from Ohio, West Virginia, and they're willing to do whatever it takes to get that, including invading into Ohio, West Virginia territory. And unfortunately for Ohio, West Virginia, all of the troops that were stationed here were Michigander troops, which means that they would prefer to be part of Michigan than to be part of Ohio, West Virginia. And so Ohio, West Virginia has to bring troops from other parts of their state to fight against Michigan, but by the time they get there, Michigan's already taken most of the state. Ohio, West Virginia fights for way longer than they probably should, but Wisconsin then will join in on the side of Michigan, which seems kind of strange, but it kind of makes sense once you realize they gave Michigan independence. And Wisconsin never really liked Ohio, West Virginia. Ohio, West Virginia tries to call the Pink Alliance, but no one comes to their aid, and it's starting to become clear the Pink Alliance doesn't really do much when there's no other alliances to challenge them. Ohio, West Virginia will agree to give Michigan independence in exchange for Wisconsin leaving them alone. Ta-da! Michigan is independent again. That was a weird way to end this episode. I bet you didn't expect that to happen. So who knows? Maybe Michigan will end up being the state that reunites the country after being conquered pretty early on. We'll see. But with that, comment down below which state you think is going to win, and thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.